Hi everybody, I'm Joe.
And I'm Mary.
And we're Book Buds! Today we are discussing The Silent Patient by, we don't really know how to pronounce this, Alex Michaelides.
That sounds good. Or Michaelides.
Michaelides. That sounds fun to say.
Michaelides.
Michaelides.
Good book.
You liked it?
I like this a lot. Since we both work in mental health, it was fun to read a book that was set in a psych facility and see this author had like a really good grasp of kind of like the day in, day out routine of what might happen on a psych ward. So it was really realistic, which was nice.
He sure did. When I was reading this, I was like, wow, he really did his research, because I worked in a psych hospital and it was pretty close.
Yeah, so that struck me right away. Can we talk about that for a little bit, the mental health piece of this?
Let's go for it.
So, you know, he had the layout of the hospital unit really well done, and the routine in a psych facility like down really nicely. But then nitpicking, there were little bits that like, he's the therapist of this patient and he is out in the community meeting, like seeking out her family and friends. And I was like, yeah, that's not appropriate. There's some kind of major boundary violation there.
Yeah.
And then when they'd ask about her, like, how's she doing? He freely said, oh, she's still not talking. And I'm thinking, do you have signed consent for this? Like, you're going to lose your license, bud.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, signed consent.
Yeah, so there were a couple of things like that that just made me laugh. But aside from that, it was really, really well written. I enjoyed the integration of the psych facility into it. There's a lot that happens in this book, and we'd like to be able to talk about it all, including the twist ending. So if you have not yet read this book, we do encourage that you stop watching right now.
Don't scram.
Because you should read it, and we don't want to spoil it for you. So it's really, truly a fun one to read. So.
Yeah, this was a great book. It's very hard to discuss this book without talking about the big reveal and the twists and turns. The book opens with her being accused of her husband's death.
Yes.
Her husband's murder. Okay? And then she just stopped talking. She's like traumatized. She has not talked. And this is what lands her in the psychiatric hospital.
And you have this therapist who's dying to work with her. He's followed her case, and he actively seeks out a job to be able to be her therapist, which right there is a little, unethical.
Yes, quite unethical.
But he sought her out to be able to provide treatment because he wanted to get her to talk. They wanted to break that silence.
So the doctor, Theo, who was treating her in the psych hospital, the author starts to tell his story. And his story is that his wife is cheating on him. He keeps following her, and he notices her with other men. Mm-hmm. And then he starts, investigating. Mm-hmm. So there's that, along with Alicia's story in the psych hospital, mm-hmm. who's he's treating. Mm-hmm. So we have these two things going back and forth.
Right, and so you're thinking that they're happening at the same time, and you're feeling like, gosh, he's awfully stressed in his personal life, and here he has to come to work and be therapeutic for this patient. That's a difficult role. But in actuality, the storyline of his life takes place 6 years prior, at the time of when Alicia murdered her husband.
Right, so then at the end of the book,
that's when we find out.
And it's like the start of her story, which was the start of the book.
I'm now spinning, even though I read it.
It's confusing, right?
Beginning and the end. What?
So what winds up happening? So let's talk about the murder itself.
Yes.
So Theo is like stalking the man that is cheating on his wife.
Yes.
This makes sense. So in Alicia's story, she notices that there's this man mysteriously out the window, mysteriously following through the park. So they think that they have a stalker. It turns out it's Theo, mm-hmm. and it turns out
who's later her therapist.
Alicia's husband is the one cheating with Theo's wife.
Now, if you haven't read this book, you're probably like, what?
I know this is so. How did this author do this? Outline. So the murder. So Theo comes in, whatever. The details that are not important. He ties up the husband. Alicia's there. He's talking to the husband, confronting him about sleeping with his wife. And he says, "Who should I kill? You or your wife?" The husband clearly does not choose.
Yeah, he says,
himself.
I don't want to die. So then Alicia, who's, had all this trust and love in her husband and devotion to him, in that moment is like, wow, this is all garbage, and this man would let me die.
For his mistake.
Yeah.
For his infidelity against her, too.
So then
this is maddening.
the husband, Alicia's husband, thinks that she's shot because Theo, the future therapist, fires into the ceiling and tells Alicia to be quiet, don't say a word. So the husband thinks that she's dead and he's upset. She quietly unties herself, picks up the gun, and blows his brains out. And falls silent for the next 6 years. Until she meets her therapist, who pretty immediately she realizes is Theo. I think, now this is something I want to ask you. When she lunges at the therapist and chokes him, I'm wondering if that was the moment that she realized he was the man that was masked in her house. You know, because when he came in her house, he was wearing a mask, he was disguised. All she could see was his eyes and hear his voice. And it said during the reveal that when he said something like, I want to take care of you, or something like that, that's when she realized it was him. So I'm wondering if that was the point where she lunged and attacked him.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
I thought so too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to know what she's feeling because she's mute, she's not talking, and she's pretty much only communicating through her paintings, and she's journaling as well. So at the end, when you finally see that these timelines are not coinciding and you realize what's going on, it was just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And like then when you read it, you're like, oh, like of course.
Yeah.
Like
You're surprised but like not shocked, you know?
Right.
Yeah. You're
right,
like,
I'm like, well, how come I didn't see that all
that
along?
fits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was amazing. This is what I wanted to say. Poor Alicia. I feel so bad for her. She had to witness her husband pretty much letting her die. And then earlier in her life, her mother passed away. And I think she might have overheard or whatever.
Yeah.
Her father said,
It should have been her. How does he say that?
about his daughter. So she had like two men in her life that she like loved and who were caretakers, and her husband
Who would
pretty
have
much
been just like, you can die.
let her
It's okay.
die. What does that do to someone? It makes
Yeah.
them mute. Go into a psych hospital. Like, oh my God,
Yeah.
this is just horrifying.
So then the book ends with her death at the hand of her therapist. Unethical! Unethical!
This poor woman. This poor woman.
Yeah.
She didn't have a chance.
Yeah. And at that point, I don't think she wanted to live anymore. She was like, you should have just shot me back then 6 years ago.
It's a tragedy.
Yeah.
If you will.
We're just going to hear. So we're going to do a scene for you today. And since we have a silent patient, Joe thought that we should do.
A silent movie, of course.
That would be fun. So we're going to do a silent movie for you with some scenes from the psych hospital. Check it out.
So we hope you're enjoying BookBuzz, and if you are, please like us
Share it with your friends.
and subscribe to our channel, BookBuzz! I had no idea you were going to give me a high note. That was a warm-up for our musical episode coming to a theater near you.